So by this part of our timeline of From Software games, Softy had really stuck close to their dungeon crawling roots with some weird mecha combat experiment in the middle. I'm sure it's something important. But the main through line between all these games was that they were long, tough, but fair action RPGs. After about 3 games of this constant formula, the team had split right down the middle. Half the team went to work on Shadow Tower, and the other half wanted to take what they had learned over 3 years of their full 3D environmental work, which peaked with the 3rd game, and launched into a brand new experience, reworking the engine slightly to work within this formula. Instead of a long-haul action RPG, the focus would be on a smaller, more tight-knit environment with the idea of quiet horror. So if I'm just paraphrasing the Wikipedia article, there's not a lot to go off of for pre-release stuff here, as the original Echo Knight did not get a lot of hype before its release. Where have I heard that before? The efforts of the team eventually birthed Echo Knight, and for their labor of love they earned, oh dear, seriously? 6 out of 10s? We're in for a treat. Well, that could be because of a couple of reasons I'll mention later, but because of this, the game did not sell well here. In Japan, it did well enough to earn itself a sequel which stayed there, as well as a 3rd entry that eventually made it stateside. Now, about reviews. Personally, I had seen the Nitrorad video long before I started this series. However, I have since long forgotten most of it and deliberately skipped another YouTuber video, Ben Again's, because I wanted my thoughts on the game to be as clear and as unburdened as I could. If you've never seen either of those channels, please do yourself a favor and check them out. They do what I do, but like a million times better. However, I guess in a roundabout way, you could say that Nitrorad was the catalyst for this entire video series to be made, as he was the one who got me interested in Softy's past. And, well, here we are, where it all began. So, Mr. Rad, if I ever meet you in real life, I owe you a beer, or a soda, or fucking copy of Skygunners. What do you want from me? However, I will say one thing. I'm very happy my memory has forgotten any context, because I really damn well like this game, and I hope by the end you can see why. The game opens with the statement that it's 1913 AD with the cruise ship Orpheus apparently disappearing without a trace in the middle of its voyage, and despite its efforts to salvage what remained, not a boat nor scrap could be found. The game continues to show you establishing shots of the Orpheus and beyond. It's kind of interesting because the game is doing something I said in the openings video. Every shot seen here is one of the game's money shots, the best parts of the game, but it's obscured in such a way that you won't realize anything is important until much, much later. A lonely and quiet title card later, and we assume the mantra of Richard Osmond and receive the realization that the game actually takes place in 1937, meaning the beginning of the game lied. Anyway, here Richard sits receiving a cryptic letter from his father, Henry, along with a strange key. Apparently Richard can't make heads or tails of the letter, but that's okay because conveniently the police want to take Richard to his father's house because it had burnt down. After the policeman rudely smacks talks the deceased, we take control of Richard and start investigating the house. It's not long before we find the only things we can interact with for the game's first simple puzzle. Once we figured it out, we can move this grandfather clock to find a red book. Merely laying eyes upon the book transports us onto a train, and although we don't know it yet, we are in the past. After investigating both cards, we find a youth we don't know, an old man we don't know, and his daughter in the second car. After we look in there, we leave the second car, and the youth heads in there after we're done and locks the door. Crawling up to the top of the train, we peer in to see a showdown between the youth and the old man, with the youth apparently trying to kill the old man, and the old man using his granddaughter as a hostage. The youth fails his quick time event and is shot by the old man. It wasn't a fatal blow, however, and the youth later gets up to talk to the girl, revealing that this youth is actually Henry, your father himself, and this daughter is Creo Walkwell. He explains that her grandfather is possessed by demons? What? He gives her a blue stone and then limps back. Chasing him, we find the old man is named William, and Henry tosses himself off the train to escape. We learn that William is holding some sort of red stone embedded into a knife before we're yanked back to the present again. Progressing further into the house, we see a strange painting depicting 2 statues in the room. Rearranging them, and the painting turns into a painting of the Orpheus, which we're whisked off to. We're spotted immediately by Captain, who takes us to the room and he tells us not to leave, and finally, we've reached the bulk of the game. That took us a while and we skipped right past the actual presentation and gameplay, but the preamble was necessary. Echo Knight is a very story-heavy game, to the point that practically all of the game is on the main path with 1 or 2 minor side deviations from your main goal. And that goal is what we'll get to. But first, the Orpheus itself. This game dropped in 1998. We weren't quite in the PS1's autumn years, but you can tell we're approaching. Frankly, this game is gorgeous for that era. Every part of the Orpheus and the many areas beyond are lovingly rendered into intricate detail. If it wasn't for the resolution, I'd say the game looks better than some early PS2 games. If this game was meant to be a show of From Software graphical prowess, they succeeded with colors flying high. As a matter of fact, the Orpheus is so well crafted, I won't lie, if it was a real cruise ship and I was alive in 1913, I would have loved to sail on it. When the game's horror is turned down, a vast majority of the game is actually quite comfy and cozy, which makes sense for what seems to be a luxury cruise liner. When the game turns its horror up, the main enemies of the game are actually pretty terrifying, but that's for later. Much like From Software's games, the music is pretty sparse in this entry, but unlike most From Software games, when it hits pretty hard. In the calmer moments, the game takes a more dramatic, calm tone that sets the perfect mystery mood, or just enough to heighten emotions. And when the ghouls come out, oh boy, the two chase themes either perfectly set up tension with imminent fear, or they decide to drill anxiety into you with Wandering Ghost. Ironically, the complete opposite of the song Wandering Ghosts. That's from Symphony of the Night. The voice acting, however, rides the line between actors trying their best and whoever they could get in the office that morning. Of the actors who actually tried their best, I would say of all of them, William is pretty good, and the mysterious medium absolutely hams the scene up.
Special potion that I've made. It may be weak, but it has the power to cure you.
And your father puts in a pretty good performance at the end. On the flip side, some of the friendlier ghosts could not be asked to put in anything.
I locked the door, but she'll still come. Why?
I swore I recognized some of the voice actors from, of all things, the PS1 Harry Potter crew, but unfortunately, like so many games at this time, all the actors go uncredited, which sucks because I would love to interview whoever played the medium. Interestingly, this game uses voice acting very specifically. If you aren't on the Orpheus, you don't get voice acting. Every single minor ghost on the Orpheus gets voice acting, even if completely optional, but none of the flashback scenes get any voice acting at all, which is a pain in the ass because a lot of these scenes are where the game's most emotional scenes happen, and they're all silent. Was this a stylistic choice? A cost-saving measure? A space-saving measure? To be fair, if there was dialogue throughout the entire game, about 60% of this game would be people talking to you, but come on, there are fully voice-acted PC games by this point. Speaking of the percentage of this game, what and how are you doing on the Orpheus? To put it simply, Echo Knight is a slightly spooky horror adventure game with a focus on puzzles and dialogue first, horror second. The controls are very similar to Kingsfield to the point that you can actually turn on a layout that calls out the series by name. You don't have much in the way of moves, you can inspect things, you can strafe, look up and down, access your inventory. You can actually mess with your turn and walk speed in the menu, however, which allows you to fine-tune the controls as you wish. Actually, the menu is full of accessibility or immersion options. You can change the font if the original is too hard to read, turn off your footsteps with a crosshair, turn off item portraits. It's got nothing on what we have in the modern area, but these are pretty nice little options for the cinematic player or the hard of seeing. You'll notice I have my crosshair disabled for most of the game, which does occasionally bring up a problem, but anything you can interact with will glow purple upon getting close, so figuring out what you can and can't use is a piece of cake. As you progress through the Orpheus, you'll find almost every one of the crew and passengers have been turned into ghosts in the form of these black, featureless shades of their former self. As it turns out, these spirits are like this because none of them could move on from their unfinished business. What this could end up being could require any number of steps and seemingly random complexity. For example, there are several ghosts who simply will move on upon completing enough of the story, whereas other ghosts require you to solve a puzzle for them. For example, an early game ghost wants to taste the drink of his dearly departed friend one last time. So you search the section of the ship he's in to find out that he's left a coded message on how to mix the drink in a painting. The next room over has a ton of paper paintings, so it's a simple deduction puzzle from there on out. When you help a ghost pass on, it leaves behind an astral piece and possibly an item. Often a ghost will need an item from another ghost to help them pass on, so it becomes a guessing game, figuring out which ghost you can assist, then using the item that they drop to help another ghost, and so on and so forth. Thankfully, each chunk of ghosts are usually located in one part of the Orpheus, and you never have to cross over these areas, meaning the solution to the puzzle you are working on is never far from where you actually are. So you can think of each area as kind of like a chapter of sorts. Now I know some of you are hung up on something I said earlier, so now you get to ask, what the heck is an astral piece? Early into your adventure, you will find a strange comic book that will talk to you, and then whisk you away to parts unknown, a strange, dark, ominous tower. I suppose you could call it a shadow tower. I'm funny. You can't leave this tower until you figure out that you need to use the book on a mural on the top floor, whereupon you'll meet a strange, bespectacled black man. The game calls him the Medium, and he claims he's a blind man using the book to see for him. Okay, and that he needs the astral pieces you are going to be collecting. For now, you have no other reasons to hang on to them, so you should hand them over even though this entire interaction is sending alarm bells ablazing. For your pieces, the man hands you weak but plentiful healing potions. He claims to help you when you're possessed, but you can't be possessed, so he's an asshole. He also hands you the other half of Freya's blue stone, so maybe he's only half an asshole. So if it said healing potions, and this game is about ghosts, you assume the ghosts could be hostile, and I mean, kinda? Throughout the game, you will find hostile ghosts that will attempt to kill you on sight. You have no real recourse to fight them, a 1v1 will never end in your favor. The only thing you can do is turn the lights on, which banishes them for a while. Each ghost has their own abilities, the little girl being able to throw things at you, the woman being able to shoot ghosts that mess with your controls, and the king-looking dude able to pull you in. The designs are actually pretty freaky, and they can come from almost any darkened room. I say almost because I learned that there's an exception to the darkness rule. If Casper is already taking up the room, there ain't no room in the room big enough for the both of them. Now, while most rooms is as simple as turning around and flicking a switch, there will be rooms in the Orpheus where that's not viable, either because the ghost is edge guarding it or because the switch doesn't work, usually requiring yet again another puzzle. As a matter of fact, the entire final area before the endgame is completely darkened and none of the lights work, requiring you to constantly dodge the king. If you are hurt, the game's one and only HUD element aside from the crosshair appears, letting you know how close you are to death's door. However, if you're diligent in turning in astral pieces, the ghosts aren't especially fast on their feet or able to ambush you that well that you'll take fatal damage often, meaning they are more of a nuisance than an actual threat. Hell, the woman rarely likes to move away from her one spot she picks every time. Usually, however, you take insane damage if you're foolhardy enough to try to challenge them without solving the puzzle. And to be fair, I kinda love what happens when you die. The policeman who accompanies you to the house manages to find the Orpheus painting with a blank, featureless ghost appears at his feet, and it doesn't take long for the officer to ID you. Because you failed, now you join the restless spirits of the Orpheus, forever unable to find peace under the crushing guilt of being unable to find your father. Game over. Damn. And I thought you and your friends are dead, game over was brutal. I would, however, like to point out that to get this, I had to make an astronomically stupid decision that I knew was stupid. There are no instant kills in this game to my knowledge, so unfortunately the horror in this game feels a bit more token than horrifying, leaving the atmosphere and music to pick up the slack, and thank God they did, otherwise these guys would be a joke. Each of these ghosts will also be dispelled in boss fights, and I say that with the biggest air quotes ever because they all play out the same way. You enter the room, the ghost shows up, and it's a hopeless boss fight. You exit the room, find some way to go back to the past to get an item that allows you to help him pass on to the present. Oh yeah, that's the last element of the game I should mention. At various points, whether by talking to certain ghosts or investigating certain objects, Richard will be thrown back to the past. Usually your goal here is to find something in the past that will help you in the present. For example, the first ghost you'll find will mention that he can't pass on because he has no idea what happened to his lover because he was forced to leave before they could confess to one another. This prompts you to go to that very day where you can find the engagement ring and give it to the girlfriend. It's too late to help them reconcile, but you can take the ring to the present past? And give it to the man to help him pass on. This isn't common enough that it detracts from the atmosphere, making these fun breaks away from the Orpheus when they do crop up. Although, again, the lack of any voice acting in these segments is a pretty huge detriment to the mood, especially as stated previously, this is where the plot gets rather juicy. Speaking of which, it's about time that we get back to the plot. It becomes clear rather fast something went horribly wrong on the Orpheus, but it's even clearer that something specifically is up with William. It seems that every character on board the Orpheus is just a degree of separation away from the Rockwell family. While the first batch of ghosts don't seem to have any real relation, when we finally get our showdown with the little girl ghost, we learn that the Rockwell family had purchased a mine, and that little by little, people started to disappear. During the next chunk, we meet a doctor who's particularly worried about a poison for William, which turned out to be a prescription that he planned to use to kill other people. For whatever reason, this failed or didn't work out the way he intended because he ends up getting his hands dirty and killing his own son and daughter. If you haven't gathered it by now, William went off the deep end a long time ago, and it all has something to do with his red knife. This is where I'm going to throw up a spoiler warning, as the mysteries of the red knife and William's motivations are the key figures of this mystery. If you figured them out early, hey, there's no mystery. You ready? So not long after you watch them die, Alfred and Hilda ask you to stem their father's evil tide, giving you part 1 of a 4-part lock to reach William, who's apparently on the ship, alive! Before that, however, you get to see how the Rockwell family came into the stone's possession. Some unknown years ago, a rogue mercenary by the name of Alan Rockwell managed to corner a king in his own bedroom. He claims the stone is what made the king so powerful, so he strikes the king down and claims the stone for himself. The stone apparently has the power to change destiny, but what charges the ability isn't made clear. But clearly it's murder. I don't think people are going missing and bodies are piling up around William because the stone is powered by breakfast sandwiches. The way the game tries to teach you what's going on is kinda cool, but also really dumb at the same time. So at another point you enter a flashback where you enter a catacomb. It's not long upon fooling around that you're caught by... Okay, that's clearly William. And he's clearly leading us away from the entrance by claiming we're going to the exit. And yep, that's a dead body, and now you're stuck with a homicidal maniac with a supernatural knife.
What the fuck, Richard?
This may be the scariest moment in the game. You're up close and personal with the main villain, he has all the advantage, you don't know how to get out of here, and you don't know if he's capable of an instant kill. There's also a cool little moment here where if you miss a crucial item to exercise the second ghost. It's hard to notice the items as you're running for your life, and it would be cruel to make you replay the segment if you missed it, so the game lets you talk to the last ghost standing in this instance to get a one-on-one time with the body of the ghost to obtain the item. After this, you get a small puzzle that confirms what you already know about the redstone. It's powered by murder. However, it's pointed out that too much murder also does something fucky with the stone, and if the redstone and blue stones are combined, something big will go down. Your next step is obvious. Contact Kreia, get the other half of the stone. This takes you down into the bowels of the ship where your dad out of nowhere saves you from the evil king ghost, but he's off his depression medication and seems completely out of it. By doing a series of puzzles here, you end up having to contact Kreia by using an emergency channel on a telegraph. It makes just much sense in context. You're taken to a chapel where the only puzzle in the game I had to look up. Not because it's hard, but it's because it's a play the piano puzzle. I do not know how to play the goddamn piano. Doing this allows you to meet up with Kreia, who will swear she'll get the other half of the stone. I know it seems like I'm condensing the hell out of this, trust me, I am. There's a lot of minor characters I haven't talked about, like how this little kid is Kreia's brother. Back up top, you use all the stuff you gathered to finally open a path to William, but not before you tussle with the king's ghost for a while. After sending him to Verdite, where he belongs, you finally come face to face with William, and he's looked better. With only 3 living characters on the ship and 1 bladed weapon, you can surmise what happened. William has terrible news. Kreia is dead long before she can meet you. William then uses your power to send you back in time to take the lone bullet before it can be used to kill Kreia. However, it's a canon event. Walking outside, you meet the man with the machine gun, and he manages to bullshit her into giving the blue stone and getting you all killed. Kreia rolls a nat 20, 1 and 20 for her strength, dexterity, and luck rolls in that order as she manages to knock the man off the ravine, jump down herself in the process, and send the blue stone hurtling towards your feet. With the completed blue stone in hand, you enter the very bottom of the ship to finally reach the red stone, now wielded by your very own father. The red stone goes absolutely berserk and releases... What the absolute fuck is that? I'm not kidding. There's no joke here. This is one of the scariest monsters in a video game for me. Not making matters better is that he walks through walls. You need to make one final chase to the innards of the ship to locate an emergency override key and a valve to overload the pumps down here and turn on the emergency lights. With the lights on, the final specter is destroyed and you can throw the blue stone at the red stone to neutralize it and book it out of there as fast as you can. Kreia, Ghost appears thanking you for your work before she sends you off the Orpheus right before its fated disappearance. You wake up in front of the officer from the beginning and start to get a ride home when... okay, his car breaks down. Alright, let's just go get the tools and... God damn it. Here we go again! This is just one of the endings in Echo Knight, and obviously not the best one. It's just still things we need to wrap up. There's an ending if you fail to escape the ship in the final countdown, but that's more of an extended game over. But I went the wrong damn way the first time and still had more than enough time to escape, so I think you need to be trying to get this one. You don't even get credits. You don't deserve them if you get this ending. So the obvious question is, how do you get the other endings? Well, it's simple. You have to obtain every astral piece and ship them off to the medium. The vast majority of astral pieces are required to continue the game, and the few that aren't are off to the side, really don't require anything too taxing. Except there's a casino in this game, and there are 3 ghosts in here. You need to collect all 3 to get the other endings. So how do you do that? Through the game you can get claim tickets for chips, and these can go on the roulette board. You only need to collect 100 chips on the board, so taking the scorched earth approach to gambling will win. But then there's blackjack. And I don't have a concise way to say this, so, Chris Bowden?
What pig fucking cousin sucking deep fried double wide inbred corn fed communist fuckknuckle thought it was a good idea?
Thanks, Chris. There's absolutely nothing you can do about this. Do you know how many hours I wasted trying to beat the house at their own game? Because that's what you're doing. There's no puzzle here, there's no way to cheat the deck. You either have to be a master at blackjack or be incredibly lucky just to clear the minigame. Unlike the roulette table, you can't make high bets, so you are reliant on consistently getting good luck and playing well for God knows how many hands just to scrape by 200 chips. You know, while this was going down, I was reminded of Mega Man X5. You never played it. It's infamous in the fandom for the ending being entirely luck-based, even if you did absolutely everything you could to win the game. Note for developers, do not make your endings based on random fucking chance. Once you have all the astral pieces and turn them in, the medium will reveal he is the one who created both stones by recreating the evil knife. Right before the end of your escape from the Orpheus, you can enter a new secret-ish room to get the choice of whether to take on the new knife yourself. If you do, you get the evil ending where you start the cycle all over again by shanking the police officer. If you don't, you get the good ending where the cycle is ended for good and the stone disappears with the Orpheus. I rather enjoyed Echo Knight for what it is. It's a comfy, cozy adventure game that I hardly noticed the time fly by while I was figuring it out. It's none too punishing, none too difficult, not too wacky, and it keeps a decent mystery all the way to the end. With the last few scenes the medium being thrown in, there's a lot you can theory craft about the game. However, the few issues that are there really end up detracting from what could have been a masterpiece of console adventure gaming. The lack of voice acting in the areas, ironically, where it'd be more critical to have it, and everything to do with the casino end up pulling the game away from classic status. That and the game's pathetically short runtime and no replay values are 2 more nails in the game's coffin. The game is good, but it's easy to see with just a few more tweaks how it could have been so much better. I think games like Hotel Dusk, Room 215 take what this game started and did it a lot better. Still, Hotel Dusk isn't a murder mystery, and it doesn't have that signature from polish. So there's that to consider. The next game may have been Japan only, but yay for fan translations. But before that, we have some unfinished business.